First of all, thank you for having us. It's a really interesting talk today, actually. The theme of this year is obviously the power of good and the power of good people, and we really wanted to show you a panel of the power of really good, diverse people. I think that's where we can really harness some good growth. So, my name's Rich. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the CEO of the Diversity Standards Collective. For those of you who haven't heard of us, I've been banging on for the last 3 years here, so hopefully you all have. We are a cultural consultancy company, agency, and we connect Mindshare and many other brands and clients with diverse people from across the globe. Insight, strategy, planning, all of these things. And here's some wonderful stuff. And we have a great group of the DSC consultants who we've been working with for a number of years now, which is brilliant to have. I'm going to pass you along to them all to introduce themselves first. Shay.
Hi, so I'm Shay Eccleston. I am a creative consultant, a corporate trainer. My pronouns are she, her. I have a bunch of experience, and I do EDI. I'm an author. Where I intersect is I'm a woman, invisible illness, I'm black, all of these different things. So you'll find that as you go down the panel, a lot of us have kind of we intersect in the way that we are diverse as well. So I'll pass you on to Paddy.
Thank you. My name's Paddy Paddison, which, I think it's pretty memorable, so I've managed to remember it so far. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a senior creative. I've been working in advertising for, I want to say, like 9 years. I'm not 16, though, even though I do kind of look very young. I'm really happy to be here chatting with you all, so thanks.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ronan Chua, and I fancy myself as a creative mother. I've been in advertising for over 2 decades, and my pronouns are he and him. I'm East Asian Pacific Islander, and I just came out of the closet 15 minutes ago. No, I came out when I was 4 years old.
Hi, everyone. My name's Nabil Isman. My pronouns are she, her. I am a British Bangladeshi Shia Muslim. And I'm a creative, full-time corporate. I also manage an independent charity shop, so I have a lot of different things going on, and looking forward to talking to you.
Hi, my name is Saz Vora. I'm a South Asian diasporan woman, so I didn't actually... I've been to India. I was never born there. My parents were. I came from East Africa, and I am a writer. I write stories about not belonging anywhere because I don't belong in one community or the other, and I'm looking forward to having discussions with you guys.
I've got a mic, thank you. My name is Ayo Banton. I'm a photographer and creative director. My pronouns are he and him. My parents are Jamaican, but I'm class myself as a tough Yorkshire lad. That's it from me.
Hi everybody, I'm Dom Hyams. My pronouns are he, him. As you might see, I'm a wheelchair user. I've got brittle bones. I am head of strategy at Purple Goat Agency, which is a disability-led social first agency and the world's only disability-led social first agency. So lovely to be here and look forward to chatting with you all today.
Amazing. I'm loud with my mic? Yep. Okay. So first off, I want to talk to you about consumers and audiences and what you think that they are. A lot of the time, most brands assume that the majority of their audience is white, straight, non-disabled. That may be some of the statistics they get back, but a lot of the time they haven't asked the right questions. They may not have asked if they were disabled or LGBT. They also haven't thought about the network around them, and that's really what we're going to talk about today. I also wanted to add that I think what we notice in the last couple of years especially is that our industry tends to pick trendy communities over others, and we see this influx and change quite often. You know, I think that my community, like gay men, like 4 years ago, we were like top dogs, and then it's sort of moulded around, and then it's all very important. We see BLM happen last year, and every brand's coming saying what we can do for the black community, which is brilliant, but everyone else seems to be forgotten. And I think what we want to start doing is a good strategy for sort of good growth when it comes to our consumers is representing everybody evenly, or looking into the data that we have to see who's maybe over-indexing within our brands, and then speaking to them more authentically. But I think what we're going to find out today, as Shay sort of mentioned, is how we sort of blur and intersect over lots of different things, and we shouldn't be viewed homogenistically, is that a word? There we are, use it as that. So the first question I'm going to ask everybody, one is, why should your community not be sort of forgotten when it comes to brands? I'll go to you.
Thank
First, Shay, I'm picking on you today.
It's actually it's such a simple but deep question, and the simple but complicated answer is, well, why shouldn't they be? Like, why should they be? We all came into this kind of world in the same kind of way, and I think it's important that we understand that communities like mine. So I'm speaking on behalf of Black people, I'm speaking on behalf of women, I'm speaking on behalf of, like I say, a range of different things. And if I'm thinking about all of those communities, the reason they shouldn't be forgotten is because actually they're not in, that we're in the world. So if you're representing us, if you're telling our stories, then surely it just makes sense to have our stories as part of your narrative. Otherwise you're not authentic, you're not being transparent and honest and real. And as you mentioned, actually the stats let us know that it's way more diverse than we think it is. So I was saying a little while ago that I was walking down the pavement today when I was coming here, and there were two people walking towards me and I was walking towards them, and actually they didn't move to let me pass, so I had to alter my route to pass. And fundamentally, there was space on the pavement for all three of us, and it could have just been like that. So I feel like that with the, digital marketing and all of this, why we're here today. I feel like there's space for everybody, and why shouldn't it be, why shouldn't we contribute? Why shouldn't we be a part of it? And I think it's been too long that we've been forgotten for whatever reason. The reason stopped mattering a while ago. Just start including people.
Yeah, and I think that's a great metaphor for what we were just saying about sort of trends, is that if there's a certain community on the pedestal right now, it sort of implies that soon they will be moved off it to put somebody else on, and we want to make sure everyone has that space.
Sorry, and one more thing, two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
So we're not trying to knock someone else off to get on that
Exactly,
pedestal.
we're all trying to be there together.
Exactly, which means that a middle class, white, rich male can also be represented.
Exactly. Same question
We're
to
going
you.
down the line.
Yeah. Oh, we'll go down the line and I'll switch it around.
Okay.
Go on, yeah, go on.
Cool. I am a non-binary person, and that then makes me part of the trans community, which also makes me part of the LGBTQIA+ and queer community. Got it right. We do it as well. It's fine. And I am going to speak from my part of the community as a non-binary person. So currently in this country and a lot of other countries, non-binary people aren't recognised legally. It's like we don't actually exist. We don't have gender markers for our passports. We don't have equal healthcare, and we don't have bathrooms in most places or changing rooms, which is sometimes a bit annoying. So I think that basically if we start to be portrayed more in advertising, in media, as real and valid, and people worthy of including in your adverts and including in your storytelling, then it shows us that we can kind of believe in ourselves a little bit more, and it shows other people that they can believe in us. And if I think people, especially in this country, kind of work on what other people are doing, so they it's like lead by example, right? So if other people start including non-binary people and non-binary stories in their advertising, more and more people will start doing that, and then us as a community will start seeing it and believing in ourselves more, which is kind of the most important thing. So
Perfect, thank you very much. I'll skip down now. I'll go to Dom straight away. We'll go back. Well done, nice saved.
So the disabled community make up roughly 15 to 20% of the population, depending on what statistic you're reading and what you're including. But essentially, that's a hell of a lot of the population. And to represent disability effectively, you're kind of got to represent a little bit of everyone in that. Wheelchair users only account for 8% of the disabled population. So I'm sure you'll agree when you see a depiction of disability, all too often it's just slapped on a wheelchair user, and that's a good job, well done. But the reality is disability is extremely diverse in itself, and so to engage with disability effectively, you're engaging with a potential consumer base that actually doesn't feel engaged, doesn't feel representative, because you're not representing that 80% plus of the population that has non-visible disabilities. So back to Rich's question, why include disability? You can do it because it's the right thing to do, but you can also do it because if you don't do it, you're mad, because it's an unbelievable opportunity to engage with a community that up until now aren't being directly marketed to and communicated to by brands up and down the land.
Yeah, and I think just to add, when we're talking about the non-binary community and the disabled community, we're talking a lot about why. I think everyone probably thinks in their head, well, how? And I think there's probably too much. There's loads of ways that I think we all know how. We won't have 19 minutes to go through it, but if you want to come to one afterwards, you should definitely ask. Saz, pick on you next. Is that okay?
I think that the trouble is with representing anybody who's from a diverse community and a minority community is that there's a tendency to tick a few boxes. Once you've ticked your few boxes, as a brand, you actually think you're doing something, but actually you're doing a disservice for the rest of the people that are in your audience. By all means, we all tend to, and I do it all the time, if I see a black character in a TV or a film that isn't necessarily would have been a few years ago a white person, I kind of think, oh, that's good, but I shouldn't be doing that. You should be putting people like me, people who belong, and I belong in a very strange situation. I am of Indian heritage, but I was born in East Africa. I grew up here. I didn't have any of those restrictions that are known for women of my age, I'm 50 plus, who went through. And so therefore, you need to be aware that as a brand, as somebody who's actually trying to engage the audience, that we all don't fit in one box. And so therefore, when you're trying to represent somebody who's South Asian woman who's in her 50s, please do not put her in a sari. Please do not have a little bindi on her head. Please do not make her meek and mild, because we're not. We roar a lot.
Yeah, that's good. I think also what's good to add is don't discount communities because you think that they won't like a product or like something. Can you be like, oh, well, that, I don't know, parties or something. You're like, oh, they're not going to like that sort of thing. What can we do for this community?
And we all go to parties. We all dress. We all drink to some extent. But so that's the idea. That the idea is that you think, oh, actually, do you know what and that's the problem. There are stereotypes that keep repeating over and over again, and we end up being put into that stereotype, but we're not. So when you're actually showing a story or telling somebody about your brand, be a little bit more. What's the word? I've forgotten. No, don't be lazy. Research, find out, talk to people. There are lots of people that are willing to talk about where they belong and what their identity is.
Yeah. And I think talking to people is key because Google lies. Google doesn't really know much about communities, I don't think, really. It knows what some media outlets have said or something has been put out there, but actually I would always just do your own digging because also everything changes and people change and people grow. And I think that's what we can represent. Nabila, can I go to you next?
So I'll speak briefly about my intersection of identity as a hijabi Shia woman. So oftentimes if you see a Muslim woman in media, she has to look a certain way. And it's completely fine to wear black, but you never see her wearing bright colours, kind of like how I accidentally wore today. And I normally dress like this as well. She's usually really miserable, and if it's in a drama, for example, there'll be some point in the narrative where she takes off her scarf. And it happens so often, and she has to be liberated, and then that's when she's cool, and then, her whole personality changes. And then in advertisements, you'll often see hijabi women who are actually not hijabi women. They'll be cast by people who are not even Muslim. And I feel like that is so dangerous because there are many models out there, who would happily take those roles. And that would be more authentic. And something that I found really cool recently, I don't know if there's any Marvel fans in here, but
yes.
Yeah? Miss Marvel was something that came out fairly recently. And for me, that was the first time I saw just an average South Asian Muslim woman on TV, and it wasn't cringy. It was actually really cool. There was a scene where they did Bollywood, but it wasn't cringy. They had to dance, of course. But I think we need more of that. And to add on to that as well, not only do we need to see Muslim people represented, but I think we also need to start seeing other types of Muslim people. It's always the same types of Muslims, and I think it would be really wonderful if we start to see some Shia Muslims. They don't need to say, hi, I'm Shia, but even just showing different ways of praying. It's really subtle, but it would be so powerful.
I think even hearing the phrase show different types of Muslims is a really new thing for a lot of people to hear, because I think people think this is one idea of this community. And so, thank you very much. Ronan, I'll go to you next.
A couple of years ago, I remember while I was still working in an agency, there's always this thing about trendy themes. So I think recently there's this thing about ads coming out as authentic. And then a few years ago, there was this thing about ads showing the grittiness of it. But way back, there was this strong push for a lot of big brands to do aspirational. And when you ask, how should the house look like? Oh, it has to look like aspirational middle class. How should the job be? Oh, what's the new aspirational job for uprising middle class people? Oh, he could be a copywriter. I think it's important to do representation across our spectrums because these opportunities open up possibilities. What these aspirations were may or may not happen, but it shapes that idea to someone who's watching it that it could happen. You could have it. You could do it. And I think coming from, should I talk about the East Asian part?
You go for it, yeah.
So, and it's one of the things I think I find lacking while I've been living in the UK for the past 3 years. And it's one of the things I find lacking in terms of depictions across different kinds of media. And I think there's a lot of work that can be done to show an aspirational reshaping of how East Asians should be, could be, and are, and will be.
Perfect. Oh, yeah. Last one.
Well, it's fascinating what you're listening to. For one, I don't imagine for one that no one in this room really tries or doesn't want to see diversity. I just can't imagine that. You do hear it from politicians often. Just in last month, I heard, I think it was Dominic Raab said something about he was actually against diversity within organizations as a job. They shouldn't be leaders because, as far as he was concerned, this was it wasn't needed. We didn't need to pay for these diverse groups to sit within organizations. That to me is a serious problem. That is a serious problem. What does that tell me though as a creative, as someone who looks at representations? That the only way to counter this is to counter it. But the question is, what type of image do you counter it with? It's easy saying, well, we want to see different representations, but it's harder countering it with a representation that turns that image on its head. How do you do it? And I remember reading Bell Hooks, and she writes about how you do it. There's some creatives that have developed a way that you counter the negative representation. For example, there is a film by Charles Burnett, I think it's called Gravy Train, if I'm right, and there's this beautiful scene where there are two Japanese travelers, and they're traveling in the United States, and they're looking around and trying to find directions, and they see a black male, and they go to him and ask him for directions, and he answers back in Japanese. And in an instant, this visual of this character is turned on its head in an instant. And what Bell Hooks is pointing to is that there are ways we can, as creatives, as image makers, counter these, as everyone has pointed out here, these stereotypes. But it is going to take some work. It's going to take some work, some consideration. But guess what? It gives us a better creative. Because what does it do? It engages viewers even more so. Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want that? So I think these types of discussions are fantastic. If I was an advertiser, I'd be filling my teams with insights, like heavenly insights like this, that can allow us to engage with these types of ways to counter these stereotypes. Because it's not that easy. It's not that easy. I have one, which is I hate seeing black males represented as not soft. I want to see sensitivity because it's a problem. Look at Rodney King back in Los Angeles when he was beaten by police officers. Why did they beat him? Because we thought he was going to get up. We thought he was super strong. Where did that image come from? And look at just only a few years ago, the same problem. These stereotypes, how we see particular males or black males, these inform our actions. So it's crucial that we do this and look at the way we want to represent people. I think it's not an easy task, but when we have panels like this, they're beautiful insights to allow us to make a better creative for everyone, not just for us, but for everyone.
No, thank you very much. Yeah, and I think what's interesting is that you hear in isolation what everybody wants. Everyone wants basically similar things, which is to feel seen, to feel represented, to see that actually who we are is very different. And I imagine if you had to think about it from your own sort of points of view, if somebody makes a judgment of you without meeting you, and then they tell everybody that's what they think you're like, everyone's really fucking annoyed, because you're like, that's not what I'm like. You can do that as a general. You want someone to come over to you, get to know you, and then you can present how you are, or who you are, or what your thoughts and feelings are in anything. And I think that's what we have to do with our audiences, is part of being a marketeer is that we think we have to answer these questions or know these answers, because that's what we're trained to do, get in the heads of different consumers. But actually asking and doing those insights that we've been doing with Mindshare for however many years now is brilliant, and fuels so many interesting things, like you say, like differences. And actually any brand that comes through our door now, we can be like, well, I know that every audience is going to be interested in them. And if we think about it, no audience here doesn't drive a car. No audience here doesn't buy dog food. No, every brand has its ability to hit and work within these communities. And I think what we've seen only recently with like The Little Mermaid coming out, okay? If she had been a white woman, it wouldn't have got half of the traction that it has, okay? And that traction has, if 10% of the UK is from the black community, that traction is coming from everybody. Everybody's excited. We've seen how young black girls react. My daughter's white and she's 7. She wouldn't have reacted like that if Ariel had been white. And so that's what change we can make. I actually had an argument with someone on LinkedIn today, because they said, they said it's reverse. They said it's reverse. Like, what's the logic in it? And you're taking away some of those characteristics that make Ariel. And I was like, well, I thought Ariel was a strong, independent young woman who goes against the grain of her dad and wants to experience a different life. I didn't think it was her being white. I've never talked about her that. So that's.
She also had a fishtail.
She also had a fishtail, exactly. Yeah. Do you know? This came up in John Lewis had last year as well. They were like, there was no black people in this huge meal of 50 people, and there was a dragon, and they were like, yeah, but back in those days, there wouldn't have been black people surrounding you. You were like, well, there's a fucking dragon there. So we have the license to look into it. But I think the next question is like, why does everyone get excited about different types of communities? And I'm going to pick on someone first, Ronan probably, to say like, how does it feel to you when you see other communities represented? Like, how does that benefit you, even if, say, you don't see an East Asian person represented, but you see, say, a black person represented?
I get elated, honestly. If I see something that's not regularly depicted, it breaks through the clutter instantly. And you remember it. I remember it. I remembered when I saw the first Black Human Torch. That was also a bit controversial for Fantastic Four. But then, Michael B. Jordan. Forgivable. And then now I think they made a recent announcement again that the new Fantastic Four will have another Black Human Torch. Still amazing, still interesting, but it's a talking point. It stands out. It makes not just that community shine, but the reality that, hey, maybe 10 years down the line when they do a remake, there's going to be a Chinese Human Torch. I'm up for that.
Nice. Nabila, do you want to add to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd echo everything that everyone else has already said. And when we see somebody who looks different to us on stage, sometimes it's okay to clap for them, because, your time will come. And this just makes space for those moments to happen later on. I'd give a slightly different example. A few years ago, there was a Canadian Sikh politician who received Islamophobic hate. And he didn't just say, by the way, guys, I'm not Muslim, don't hate on me. He actually defended his community and our community. And I feel like what that was a really powerful moment, and it showed solidarity, and we all are just there for each other. And I think that's what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, go.
That great example, but also the point you made before about Miss Marvel. There's something in it. If it's done well, then we're also learning, because they Miss Marvel, she was all of these things that we're now recognizing, but they also told the story of the partition, and they also told the story of all of these other things. So people now started to have this broader awareness, and I think that's really important. That's why we can cheer for people, because we're starting to understand more about what makes them so diverse and more about their identities. And each of us I think somebody along here mentioned belonging and how important it is. If each of us want to belong, we have to be able to see ourselves in every single person and them in us. So even in the story of the partition, if that's not part of my story, I can relate it to something that is part of it. So learning much more, so that when I meet you on the street, you're not such a stranger to me, even though I've never met you before. And that's why it matters so much for us to cheer for other people, because, yeah, there's just so much to learn.
Yeah, and I think that's what we can take a stance as brands. It's like we look at things about who do we want to be, or who do we want our brands to be, or who do we want our companies to be, and we want to have ethics. We want to think about if we're portraying one type of person, then that's actually helping other people understand. I hear a number of times in work people being like, well, our audience is 88% white males. They're not going to want to see diversity, and you're like, I don't know any other white male who's like that, and if I did, I wouldn't be friends with them. And you're also like, do you really want them to be your consumers buying your, I know money is what drives our industry, but it's like also, so does like brand trust and brand awareness and those sort of things. So I'm also just going to we've got about 5 minutes left, I'm going to go through a couple of statistics. So DSC has been working with Mail Metro Media, who are down there. Woo, big cheer. You've also got some little sort of brochures on your tables there from the diversity factor research that we've done, and I wanted to pick out a couple of the points that really stood out to me that I think can really help everybody in their sort of every day. One is we looked into like what is like. I feel a lot of people fire at you like the trans community is 1% of the UK, the black community, it's 40% in London, but it's 10% outside, and they always pick at these low numbers, and suddenly racists and homophobes have got really statistical, and you're like, okay, fine. But when you add it up, and that's what people view us all in isolation, and view you all in isolation actually, and when we put it together, if you add up in the UK the LGBT community, the disabled community, black, Asian, ethnic groups, we actually equal 1/3 of the UK. It was 35.6% of the UK. That's huge. That's a business case to be like, and that's not even including things like religion or class or age or all of. To be honest, diversity is everybody anyway. Like we have our consultants that come on, and really we're like we split these groups up, but anyone's welcome because everyone's diverse in some manner, like neurodiversity, etc., etc. So that's a big business case, and then the next thing to think about is that's in there is I think it's number 6. It says about people's networks, and this really shone out to me because certain numbers in there. So people in the UK, 61% of them in their network, so that's like close family or friends, were from the black community, right? So 10% of the community, but 61% know people from that community, which means that if you are getting your brand to represent them, but your brand is saying 88% are white, you're probably now showing their wives, their cousins, their friends, their family, their colleagues. So that's, again, really going to, make them stand up and notice. When it comes to, say, the non-binary community, it says here that the total was 11% of the UK said that they knew a non-binary person. When you talk about Gen Z, who we know every brief is about these days, no money though, but 21% of them know a non-binary person. Not the non-binary community,
No,
but
not yet, but
not
they
yet.
will do.
Exactly.
And they'll remember. So.
Very true. But I mean, this is something we talk about age. Like people over 50 are normally forgotten, and they have the most disposable income in the UK. So a lot of those stats are really great to look at. What else is there? So 55% of the UK know an LGBTQIA person in their network, and again, that goes up and down around sort of age groups. So I think when we look at those consumer bases and why we should be representing everyone, again, that's what we should be thinking: is everybody knows somebody. What was it, the Kevin Bacon 3 degrees of separation? It's probably like 1 degree of separation when it comes to diversity or how it works. So lastly, we've got about a minute left. I don't know if anyone's got any questions, but feel free to raise your hand. I didn't want a tumbleweed moment of no one asked any questions. But I was just going to ask you all if there's anything else you'd leave behind about the power of sort of representing everybody. Shay, can I pick on you because you're nodding?
Absolutely, I'm about to have a coughing fit, but yes. I would just say, you mentioned something before about being scared to kind of tap into those ideas and they're not going to want it. Do you know what? In those moments, you're rejecting the vulnerability of the communities you're trying to reach. And actually, if you just step out in faith and just kind of do the work, the mindset, the education beforehand, the really getting to know people, building relationships, actually it will be okay. And it's probably far better for you as an organisation, for your vulnerability to be rejected and to be proven wrong than it is for you to reject the vulnerability of the communities that we're talking about.
I was just going to say, there's got to be someone in the room who stands up for, diversity. So, let it be you. Take that moment. I'm sure a lot of you have been in rooms before. I definitely have, where they've, someone's said, oh, well, don't we want to make this couple white? Or don't we want to not have a gay-looking, we don't want a gay-looking cheese in an advert. So, God, and someone has to be that person in the room to go, hang on, no, this is ridiculous. we're moving forward. Let's keep pushing it forward. Like, I just say, like, yeah, stand by what you think is right, and don't be scared to be that person who, you know, raises their hand.
I guess what I really enjoy about this whole experience about engaging in diversity and inclusion is, even from our standpoint, even coming from the other collective, the other group, there's also a huge learning. I also have my own cultural biases, white man. You know, we all have our own perspectives and our experiences that tend to color or add filter to how we judge things and how we perceive things. And by continuously having this discussion with people, exploring different people from different backgrounds, different groups, experiencing them, living with them, getting to know them, it shapes a bigger, more diverse reality. And hopefully, you know, it changes, not necessarily instantly with me, but with the people I interact with, and it also affects them as well.
Yeah, I would say, like, when we see ourselves on screen, of course, we're going to be cheering. But then, unfortunately, we will expect opposition, as we see with Little Mermaid, which is ridiculous, by the way. So I guess what I would say is, who cares? So what? It's bound to happen. Just push forward. I get told quite often that I'm brave just for wearing bright colors, which is also kind of crazy to me. And what I always say to people is, if you're not hurting other people, just do you, and continue to represent yourself and other people.
Sorry, I think I might have to just... Sorry to interrupt you, I don't really want to do so, but thank you very much to our lovely guests, and thank you, Rich, for leading what was